Last but not least, we call for international cooperation. Europe cannot deal with this challenge on its own.
If there's one body that plays a very important role when it comes to coordinating global health policies, it is the World Health Organization.
My suggestion is that all member states should leave the WHO and follow the protocol of those research doctors who have now been proven to have been right about COVID in the first place.
Szeretettel köszöntök mindenkit még mindig innen Strasbourgból, az Európa Tanács parlamenti közgyűlésének épületéből, és most megint egy olyan kemény vitában fogok majd részt venni, ami azt gondolom, hogy mindannyiunkat érint, és ez pedig a Covid-ról szól, méghozzá az úgynevezett long Covid, tehát a hosszú Covid-ról szól, és ahelyett, hogy a WHO-t elszámoltatnák, és arra szólítaná fel az Európa Tanács az európai tagállamokat, hogy léptessék ki hazájukat a WHO-ból, az Egészségügyi Világszervezetből. Most ez a jelentés is, ez a határozati javaslat is arról szól, hogy kövessük a WHO útmutatását, holott most már ebben a vitában arról kellene szólni, hogy el kellene számoltatni a felelősöket, akik okozták az egész Covidot, akik félretájékoztattak, akik olyan protokollt írtak elő, ami miatt akár ez a long Covid is kialakulhatott. Úgyhogy tartsanak velem, biztos, hogy kemény lesz ez a vita is.
The first item of business this morning is a debate on a report titled Long COVID and Access to the Right to Health, presented by Ms. Carmen Leite on behalf of the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. Please, you have the floor.
It is a real honor for me to share with you this report on long COVID and access to the right to health, which is an acute challenge for our health systems as well as the lives of many people throughout Europe and the wider world. Although many people think that the pandemic is now behind us, for at least 22 million people in Europe, the impact of COVID continues to be a devastating reality. Long COVID is a chronic disease which affects people for months following on from their initial infection and manifests itself in the form of weakening symptoms such as chronic fatigue, brain fog, and neurological disorders. Last but not least, we call for international cooperation. Europe cannot deal with this challenge on its own. We have to pool our efforts, coordinate our research, we have to share best practice as well as mobilize resources at a global level. The socio-economic impact of long COVID is devastating. It is estimated that we have lost millions from the labor market in Europe, and it is costing up to 1% of GDP in OECD countries. But beyond the figures, we're talking about people, their lives destroyed, their families affected, and therefore we have a moral debt to those who bore the brunt of the effects of the pandemic. Here in the Council of Europe, we have to spearhead this battle. We are the guardians of human rights, and we have to make sure that we are a voice that leaves no one behind. Long COVID cannot be ignored, and we in the Assembly have an opportunity here to stand out, and that is why I call on all of you to see to it that in your countries appropriate measures are adopted. It is important that we guarantee that people who are suffering from this disease have access to proper health care, and I believe that they need to be given the hope of a full recovery. I would like to conclude by thanking the WHO. Thank you to all of you for listening to me, and I ask for your support on behalf of all of those who've suffered from long COVID. Thank you.
Then I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Giovagnoli.
If there's one body that plays a very important role when it comes to coordinating global health policies, it is the World Health Organization, from whose reports I lifted the figures that I've shared with you. Unfortunately, as if this was an irrenounceable priority, President Trump has decided to take the US out of the WHO, and that is a step in the wrong direction when it comes to preventing pandemics, spreading best practice, in particular in developing countries that need international assistance and skills, and they're the countries probably where future new viruses cases might well emerge, uncontrollable, and that spread easily. So hitting out at multilateral organizations is the wrong move, and the upshot could be counterproductive at global level. So I think we need to call on the richer countries, EU countries, to offset the financial shortfall in the funding of the WHO as a result of the departure of the US. And let's hope that that is not followed up by other countries, that example.
Then I give the floor to Mr. Toraskai.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, what we are talking about here is the so-called long COVID, but we have never talked about the real cause of the COVID. We have never talked about those responsible for the COVID tragedy. The biggest flaw of this report is that it seeks to follow the protocol of the WHO, the World Health Organization. The protocol of that WHO, which has now been found to have been guilty of committing several mistakes and even crimes. The only question is whether these mistakes were committed because they were stupid or because an Ethiopian politician involved in shady deals is running the organization and he did what he did on purpose. The WHO is funded by global pharmaceutical companies belonging to Big Pharma and by Bill Gates, who made billions of euros out of the whole COVID story and the vaccines. How can we expect an impartial, objective opinion from them? It was under their pressure, for example, that Meta censored those who dared to claim from the beginning that it was not a natural virus. We, my party, had published this scientific fact based on the findings of Hungarian researchers. Still, we got censored by Meta. The leaders of Meta, or the WHO, also censored research doctors and scientists. Now that it no longer matters, now that these billionaires have made their profits, now that the official pandemic is over, now the truth can be told, we are no longer censored for it. However, the same doctors also say that mRNA vaccines have many more side effects than they have been reported to have. This report does not deal with mRNA vaccines at all, even though not enough time has passed to declare that they don't cause any long-term damage to the human body. Today, we know that we have been lied to a lot about COVID, and that the WHO has often given us incorrect protocols. And yet, now we again intend to follow their advice on the so-called long COVID. My suggestion is that all member states should leave the WHO and follow the protocol of those research doctors who have now been proven to have been right about COVID in the first place. Thank you very much.